Hi, everybody. Today is Wednesday, October 8th, 2025, and our dear friend Laith Marouf joins us today. Welcome back.
Great to be with you, Nima.
Laith, yesterday was the anniversary of October the 7th, and the day that has somehow changed the whole face of the region. And looking back at what has happened during the 2 years, and at the axis of resistance at the Israelis, when we look at the acts of resistance in Lebanon, it was the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah together with his commanders. In Iran, we had the top commanders in Iran being assassinated by Israel. We had the same sort of policy in Yemen, and the assassination of the prime minister of Yemen together with his cabinet members. On the other hand, you see on the battlefield, before what has happened in Syria, the fall of Assad regime, we had Israelis being defeated on the ground in the southern part of Lebanon before asking for ceasefire. And during the war with Iran, as we know today, they were asking for, to put an end to the conflict. They wanted some sort of ceasefire. With Yemen, the United States came to the Red Sea and they tried to do their best. After all, Donald Trump said they capitulated, but it wasn't the case. That it seems that after all, the United States has decided that they cannot do nothing. They cannot do anything to Yemenis to change their mind. And somehow they've been defeated, and they decided to leave the Red Sea. All of these events together, what has happened so far, what's your understanding on the axis of resistance, what it was before and what it is today?
Well, look, first off, October 7th is going to be remembered as a day that changed everything in the world, not only in this region here. It has, shown us everything revealed fully, all the propaganda that has accumulated in 80 years since the end of World War II about international law, about human rights, about international organizations, about the possibilities of peace and war in this world, about what is Western societies and what is the freedoms that these peoples have, and revealed every state for truly where it stands and its elites. I think it will be remembered October 7th like World War II. This is how drastic it is in terms of the change that we have seen globally since October 7th. This is, up until now, the most important event in the 21st century. And what we should also remember here, that because this action by the Palestinian peoples that are imprisoned in the concentration camp of Gaza, that it was so ingenuitive, so brilliant, so successful, that it humiliated the might of the whole Western Empire. Besieged peoples in Gaza were able to capture 12 Israeli military bases and kill and capture the 12 most important generals in the Israeli military, under the watch of all the technologies of the West, using the most basic things that they can find. This in itself, this success, forced the West into this genocide that we see. The West and the Zionist colony cannot withstand a defeat like this. The Palestinians had to be made example of, because other nations on this planet that are oppressed, that are occupied, could have gotten ideas of that they can also achieve what the Palestinian resistance achieved on October 7th. So this open, non-stop, deliberately broadcasted genocide and abuse of the Palestinians, and the killings of civilians and leaderships in Yemen, in Palestine, in Iran, in Lebanon, were all done intentionally in such severe ways, the terrorist pager attack and what have you, so brazen in their terrorism, in their criminality, in their Satanism. This is all intentionally done in this way in order to, have all those peoples that got inspired on October 7th, the vast majority of humanity that got inspired on October 7th, to feel that the cost is too high to resist the supremacy of the West. Having said this, it's very important to remember that there was in history also other daring operations by oppressed colonized peoples that were so daring that also the West, the colonizers, resorted to mass genocide in order to deter, again, once more, these actions being taken by the colonized. And in those cases, like in Vietnam, the Tet Offensive that took the West, the United States, France by surprise, that led to mass defeat initially of the colonizers, was followed up by the mass genocide of mass bombardments of villages and towns in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, leading to 6 million Laotians, Cambodians, and Vietnamese being killed. But even this was only a delay of the reality. There was no return after the Tet Offensive to the possibility of American hegemony over Vietnam. It took years. The genocide didn't stop, but the US was defeated in the end and packed up and left. That also happened in Haiti with the Haitian Revolution against the French occupation, which was a very daring operation where the slaves rose up and slaughtered the leadership of the French occupation and military in Haiti. And the response was mass genocide, but in the end, also France had to leave Haiti. So we have historical record that if you, as a colonized, oppressed people, land a blow that is so psychologically, jarring to the occupiers, to their view of themselves as superior, to the view of the rest of humanity that is oppressed against them as superior. Because remember, like today, there's nobody that gives a damn about Israelis as more superior, about their Karmaga, about Mossad, about any of those things. They have all been diffused as propaganda. If you do something like this, the enemy, the colonizer, will attempt to also score psychologically scarring goals, as with the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, as with the assassination of Hania in Iran and or their leadership. But if you do not get scarred from this psychologically, because we can replace our leaders. I know we all love Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and all the leadership in Iran, Yemen, and Lebanon, and Palestine. They are the best of us in this age. But our nations are still fertile. They are birthing these resistance leaders, and they will be birthing more of them. And so I see it as a predictable price. And it is a price that Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah himself on October 8th, like today, 2 years ago, has taken a decision to join the Palestinians in their fight after October 7th, knowing the possibilities of what is to come from such a vicious enemy that cannot withstand such a honorable, successful, ingenuitive operation like October 7th.
I think the nature of the relationship between different parts of the axis of resistance is somehow different because you look at the Trump's peace plan and the reaction coming from Yemenis, for example. They said they did everything, they sacrificed everything for the case of Palestine. But they said, after all, we are all dependent on the decisions on the part of Hamas and the people of Palestine. And, you know, they're not asking for anything. They did, as you mentioned, with the case of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, what has happened to him. Many people, I remember, they were talking about that Hezbollah is benefiting from what's going on in Palestine, and it was totally the opposite. Hezbollah was sacrificing, was fighting because of the acts of resistance, because of the situation in Palestine. You know, for many people in the West, it's so much difficult to understand the nature of the relationship that exists, you know, among the people within the acts of resistance. How can you describe it? What is that quality or that nature that is somehow difficult for many people to understand it?
You know, the first thing is, of course, principles. And those who are leading these movements in Yemen, in Iran, in Lebanon, in Palestine, have principles that are even part of their faith. The idea of rescuing and helping and aiding those who are oppressed. The idea of standing against, dictators and colonizers and genociders. That is part of the faith of anyone who actually truly is a Muslim, whether they're Shia or Sunni. But above and beyond that, it is also the clear understanding that it is impossible to have a free Yemen as long as the Zionist colony exists. As long as the Zionist colony exists, the Arab vassal regimes that the Arabic peoples fought against since the end of World War I will remain. They only exist. The Saud family and the Thani family and the Thanayan family and Zayed family, all of those royal quote-unquote families in the Arabic world only exist today because of the existence of the Zionist colony. Otherwise, the Arabic revolutions in the end of World War II would have swept them away, and we would have had an Arab unified nation. So the leadership of Hezbollah understands that it's impossible to have safety, security, prosperity, freedoms in Lebanon as long as the Zionist colony is there. Similarly, Iran knows there is no way to have safety for the Iranian people and truly for Iran to be safe, to be a sovereign nation that cares for its own populace and its own best outcomes for its state, if there is a Zionist colony and its vassals around it. This is, on the one hand, a principled decision to stand with Palestine from point of view of religion, human rights, humanity, history, justice, and it's also a logical position from a selfish point of view. You cannot, as an Arabic or Muslim person, be free, truly free anywhere on this planet, not only in Iran or Yemen or Lebanon, if there is a Zionist colony, and if the West still is forcing every Arab and every Muslim on this planet to get a job, to be able to speak, to be an artist, To be a doctor in the UK, you have to pledge allegiance to the Zionist colony and say that Jews are supreme to you as an Arab or a Muslim. So, from a selfish point of view and from a principled point of view, there is no freedom, justice, liberty, or safety for anyone who is Arab or Muslim on this planet as long as the Zionist colony exists.
Laith, from what we've heard so far from Palestinians, basically from Hamas, are they optimistic about the peace plan of the United States? How do they find it? How and what is the position of Hezbollah? Is the same as Houthis, as Yemenis? They were talking about that it depends all on Palestinians.
Yes, I think this is the same position here in Lebanon. It's the same position in Iran. It's the same position of the Iraqi resistance. Whatever the Palestinians wish at this point to go with, they will follow. And that is because of understanding that no one knows what is actually happening inside Gaza other than the Palestinian resistance. You know, for all we know, there could be already 1 million Palestinians martyred. You know, there's a lot of studies that say 600,000 plus. And we don't know what's the position of those who are still alive. How do they feel? Now, we have also surveys that were done of the Palestinian population inside Gaza and the West Bank over the last 2 weeks. And still a majority of Palestinians inside Gaza, more than 60 somewhat percent, refuse to lay down the arms of the resistance. So it seems like up until now, Hamas has a mandate to continue fighting until there is an end to the occupation. And and or this genocide at least. So we also have a clear statement from Hamas that came out yesterday that said that they will not be laying down their arms until the end of the occupation and the foundation of a state of Palestine that can defend itself. So that's a clear indication of where we're going. Hamas is still engaged in these quote unquote peace talks in order not to look like it's the one that is refusing to have any peace talks. It knows that the negotiators, Qatar and Egypt, are both vassals of the US and are only putting pressure on it to approve what the Zionists want. It knows that no matter what they sign on to, the Zionists are going to refuse it and the genocide is still going to continue. There will be no cessation to this genocide, no matter what Hamas even signs on to, which it will not. It will not lay down its arms because we have a clear history of what happens to Palestinians when they lay down their arms, whether it's in Jordan, Amman, 1970, Black September, and or 1982, Sabra and Shatila, and the occupation of Beirut and the slaughter of the Palestinians who laid down their arms. So there is no return, there's no stopping of this right now. There will be no cessation of fire, but Hamas will continue to negotiate, and the rest of the axis of resistance will still continue to follow the direction that the Palestinian people ask for as support. And I would say one last thing, by the way, the Israelis just announced an hour ago that they caught a huge shipment of weapons coming from Iran to the West Bank. So the Iranians, the resistance axis as a whole, continues to try to arm the Palestinian resistance all over historical Palestine, even under the conditions of what we saw over the last 2 years.
Yeah. China and Russia, many of us are asking why are they not trying to be more, effective in what's going on in the Middle East, in the case of Palestine. But on the other hand, when we look at the countries, Muslim countries in the Middle East, so Russia and China looking at the situation with Turkey, Egypt. So why would someone ask more than, because if Erdogan is willing to do whatever he wants to, for just for the benefit of Turkey, not the Turkish people, but benefit of his government, he's facilitating this oil and gas coming from Azerbaijan going to Israel 40%. It's huge, it's important. They're not doing anything. If for someone, for a Russian, for a Chinese sitting there saying, so if they're not trying to help their brothers and sisters, so why should we do something for them? What is your take on that? What is your, because it seems to me that after all, the public opinion within the Muslim countries is totally different from what we see from the leadership in these countries. And we know that just yesterday we've learned that the Russian president gonna have a summit in Russia on October 15th. There are gonna 22 Arab states gonna be there. The main, in my opinion, the main objective would be what's going on in Palestine and the future of the relationship between Russia and the Arab states. What's your take on that?
I mean, look, maybe somebody from the street in the United States who has not read history over the last 100 years of the region would come to that conclusion of, well, the quote unquote Arabs, and I don't like the word Arabs, don't care about the Palestinians. Why should others care more? But it's clear that the leaders in Russia and China, and specifically their foreign affairs and their ministries of defense, have archives of the last 100 years and know that the Arabic peoples fought under tremendous odds to attempt to decolonize and to rid themselves of the vassal regimes that were appointed over them after World War One. And we remember, of course, what Khrushchev and what Mao did both at the United Nations to defend decolonizing peoples and decolonization movements in the Arabic world, in Africa and Asia and Latin America. So there is no doubt in my head that the leadership in Russia and China know that the vast majority of the Arabic people are currently ruled by vassal regimes of the West, and that the peoples are opposed to those regimes and have attempted multiple times over the last 100 years to get rid of those regimes and were slaughtered. And, there's nobody that defended the Soviet Union and Russia on this planet more than Syria, for instance, right? And unfortunately, it seems like the right now, at least from what I see, the Russian elite, the Russian government, is trying to court these vassal regimes of the West, thinking that it can sway them to its camp, and or China is deciding that they're going to do business with whoever want to do business with them. Now, as we can see, governments and states in the Arabic world that stood by the Soviet Union on Russia for 80 years, since the end of World War II, have now all been destroyed. Libya, Syria, Yemen, Egypt is taken over after the Camp David Accords. And on the other hand, all those that the West had protected are still there. Dictatorial regimes with no elections, no nothing, zero rights for minorities and women and what have you, and they're safe and protected 100%. So it's illogical to think that Russia can somehow offer Erdogan or the Saud family something that is more enticing than what the West can offer them. I mean, the West destroyed all the enemies of these vassals in the region. And Russia and China sat by and watched as their own allies got wiped off the map. So, what can Russia actually gain more from the Arabic states, or is these vassal Arabic states going to actually sway Russia even more towards the camp of the West? And this is where the situation gets scary because of how Russia rebranded itself after the collapse of the Soviet Union from being allied with the decolonizing peoples of the world to being the guardian of Christian whitehood, right? This is a scary, actually, situation where now Russia is competing with Washington and London and Rome once again about who is the representative of white Christendom. And that means it will be shifting more and more towards nationalistic, anti third world positionalities, right? China is, I don't know what is happening in China, honestly. I still cannot understand the logic of China's actions in the region, where it could easily stop trade against with the Zionist colony and have direct impact without entering any military, problems in the region or sending weapons to the region. It has so much economic weight globally that it can stomp around in the yard, and just by using its economic weight, as the U.S. has done for decades, tell its trade partners that it will, for instance, cut trade or raise taxes on anyone that trades with Israel. You see, there's possibilities for China to do a lot, and Russia too. And I think we are, unfortunately, at this moment, as axis of resistance, as Arabic peoples in the region and Muslim peoples in the region, are left to fend for ourselves. And this is why Iran has been successful up until now, because it managed to raise its military technology caliber to the point where there's very little that it needs from China and Russia in terms of military technologies, and therefore it can defend itself without having to, hope that China and or Russia go the right way.
Yeah. Can we say that the only loss on the part of resistance? I cannot say the only loss, because what has happened in Gaza, the genocide, is a huge loss. It's unbelievable. The destruction, as you mentioned, the number of people who have been affected, who have been, suffering in Gaza, who have been murdered in Gaza. But strategically, when you look at the axis of resistance, can we say the only loss has happened in Syria? How
Yeah,
much of loss is that? And it seems to me somehow tricky to say that is a total loss. And your take on that?
it is definitely, after counting all the leadership uh, that were martyred and the huge number of innocents that were martyred, definitely Syria is the biggest blow, not only to the axis of resistance, but to the whole Arabic peoples and the decolonization movement globally. This is the first country, was the first country that escaped colonialism after World War II at gunpoint. It wasn't given its independence, as a vassal. just for show by the West. This was a revolution that kicked out the French and British occupation. It was the first. It was before China became an independent state, before China liberated its own land, Syria did. So it was also the longest, uh, you know, independent state. 1942 to 2024. North Korea is younger than Syria. Cuba is younger than Syria. There's no other. And most of the other states that escaped colonialism have been recaptured by colonialism since. We have just a few countries like North Korea, Vietnam, Cuba that are still independent after that independence movement and revolution, decolonization movement. So it's a huge blow to all of humanity. And we look at what's happening right now in Syria. I mean, I pity my people. Yesterday and the day before, and for the last week, all the music conservatories in Damascus, in Aleppo, were raided by these Wahhabi death squads, and all the music instruments destroyed. Music instruments that some of the most important Syrian music geniuses played on over the last 100 years. Okay. The fine arts school in both Aleppo University and the Damascus University, and their all the display of arts that they had destroyed. Some of these statues and paintings were created by the most important geniuses of Syrian art since independence. And of course, we had this apparently election in Syria over the last 2 days, where Al-Julani appointed 1/3 of the new parliament, and then a committee that he appointed the other 2/3 of the parliament. And Western media is billing it as the new government and the new democracy in Syria. So, this country was always the heart of Arabic resistance for the last 100 years. It's also the oldest capital in the world, Damascus. Damascus fell to the hordes. Damascus is now beholden by these Wahhabi death squads. It's the capital of the first Arabic empire, the Umayyads. It served as the longest capital of Muslim empires. Okay, it's now in the hands of these Wahhabi death squads. So it is a huge, huge loss. And I think the only thing that is keeping most people in the West or even outside the Arabic world of understanding how significant the loss of Syria is, it's because of the cumulative racism that is there and the lack of knowledge of the history of the Arabic people because of this huge amount of propaganda that accumulated in the collective mind of humanity, thanks to the Zionists and the imperialists.
Laith, there was a confrontation between HTS and Kurdish people in Syria. What was that? What is going on in Syria? When you look at the United States is supporting these Kurdish regions, and HTS is supported by Israel, the United States, by Turkey. But after all, it seems to me that the whole situation in Syria, it's all about balkanizing Syria. Is they want to break down the country. They want to, is that the main goal in Syria?
It definitely seems like it. The Kurdish militias, the Kurdish Contras that control northeast Syria are directly controlled by the American military and CIA. Similarly, the Wahhabi death squads that control the population centers between Aleppo and Damascus are backed by the CIA and the Turkish military and intelligence and the Israelis. The um, Druze supposed militias that Israel is also supporting. So it's a situation of the snake eating its own tail. There is control zones, and there is a kind of a squabble over resources. The Kurdish Contras in the northeast of Syria, even with the importation of Kurdish colonists from Turkey, is still a majority Arabic and Assyrian zone, and therefore they need to create ethnic cleansing and movements and changes of demographics of areas to create this balkanization that they aim for. Up until now, the balkanization is impossible because of how integrated the population of Syria's various components are. There's Christian village beside a Sunni village, and or a city that is multi-faith, and so on. How can you create balkanized states if you don't have purity of collectives? So they're trying to force the Durzi Syrian to stop thinking of themselves as Syrian and think of themselves as Durzi first. That can't happen if there's no massacres. And the Druze in the neighborhoods of Damascus will not leave and go to Suwaida to have a canton if they feel safe. Similarly, the Kurdish populations that are north of Aleppo city will stay where they are if they're not harassed into leaving. And or the Arabic and Assyrian population in the northeast of Syria will stay where they are if they're not threatened with death. So, and a marker of how all of this is just theatrics created by the Kurdish Contras that are selling their own people, and the Wahhabi Contras that are selling their own people, also the Syrian people, Arabic, and so forth, Sunni people, is the fact that we saw Thomas Barak, the envoy of Trump, arrive with the commander-in-chief of, or the head of the Central Command of American operations in the region, first to visit the Kurdish militias in the northeast of Syria, and then he went to Damascus and met with al-Julani. And we know that we didn't see the pictures, but we know that this actually Thomas Barak arrived with the leadership of the Kurdish Contras to Damascus. This is all a ploy. They're all playing this game. There is no battle between ISIS, Al-Qaeda, HTS, and the Kurdish Contras. They're all the same team. And they're just wearing different jerseys on the field, but they're really the same team. And the people of Syria, no matter what their ethnic and or religious background, are all collectively the victims of these vassals of the US.
And we talk about the loss on the part of the acts of resistance. I think we have to mention what was the win on their part. I would argue that they couldn't do what they wanted to do with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is still there, powerful, is getting better day by day. And they couldn't do regime change in Iran. They wanted to do regime change. They wanted to bring down the government in Iran and in Yemen as well. But despite all of these complexities, I think something beyond that has happened in all over the world, which was the public opinion. How what has happened in the aftermath of the October 7 has influenced the people all around the world. We're not just talking about Africa, Middle East, you know, Asia. We're talking about the most pro Israelis in the West. You see, in Europe, in the United States. You know, the other day I was looking at the poll in Germany. 3 out of 4 people in Germany believe that what's going on in Palestine is genocide. You know, before all this happening, nobody was talking about what was going on because this wasn't everything. You know, many of us are focused on what has happened in the aftermath of October the 7th, but it's a long history of what has happened during the years to the Palestinian people. But what is the outcome of the whole situation for more than 2 years? For 2 years, is the shift in the public opinion, specifically in the West. Is that a win for the axis of resistance for the Palestinian people?
No doubt it's a win. Clearly, I think the people that organized and planned October 7th were brilliant. Look, I want to dispel two things before we continue this. Number one, the idea that somehow October 7th is a mistake. Okay. Those who designed October 7th knew the violence and the monstrosity of our enemy. And they had a choice as the uh, Arab vassals were moving towards the Abraham Accords. Trump had already bequeathed Jerusalem and the Golan Heights to the Zionists. The world was forgetting the suffering of the Palestinian people and concentrated on other war fronts. So they had no choice but to take a drastic action, an action that is so shocking that it is like a cold shower that wakes up the whole world. And they were successful. God bless their souls. May God, forgive them for any mistakes they've done, because we haven't yet seen that they made a mistake. The other thing that we should dispel here is the crazy idea that is mainly propagated by people that call themselves anti-Zionist Jews, that somehow the Mossad knew, that the Mossad and the Israelis are so, God-seeing, that they knew this was happening and they let it happen in order to justify the genocide. And I blame these people that speak in this ways. I blame the way they speak on their internalized Jewish supremacy. Those who cannot fathom that an Arab or a Muslim can come up with such a brilliant idea that they can surprise the Zionists. So it's part of the internalized racism. Now, having said that, I think the Palestinian resistance in Gaza not only knew that their action will shock the world, but they knew also that their action will come with a high price. Given that, by the way, Sinwar read the Tet Offensive, read in his jail time in Zionist, dungeons about the many various resistance operations of various occupied and colonized peoples around the world in history. Before he designed such a thing, he knew the price that would come with something like the Tet Offensive. And he knew that what would be required after taking such an action as October 7th is perseverance, is patience, is waiting, is fighting the long fight. In the end, already your enemy lost from step one. And the more vicious your enemy gets, the closer they are to the end of their reign. So the sacrifice that the leadership of the resistance willingly gave It is what changed the world today. It's what changed the opinions of the Western audience that has been under an umbrella of an iron propaganda wall that the Zionists have instituted for 80 years over them. And those numbers that you talked about, they're very shocking for the Zionists, because they have invested so much in the German guilt situation around the Holocaust that you'd think that they will be the last. But there is also the numbers in the United States that came out in the last week, those surveys, that shows also the vast majority of Americans believing the same thing. And even more shocking is the numbers of Jewish Americans. I think it's like almost 75% or something of Jewish Americans believe that Israel is committing war crimes, and over 50% believe that Israel is committing genocide. So again, all of this tsunami of change, tectonic change in Western opinions, because the rest of humanity was always with Palestine. They've lived the same things that we've lived in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, as we live in Palestinians. We didn't have to convince the Africans, Asians, and Latin Americans about this. But this tectonic shift in opinions in the West could not have happened without all of this sacrifice, without the Palestinians showing the world what is happening to them. And I think we're now beginning to finally see the results, tangible results to this tectonic change in opinions that is happening in the West. And the tangible effect of that is right now a possibility of civil war, militarized militancy in the West. What's happening, by the way, in the United States, in Chicago and Portland and California, it's not about migrant workers only. I think the most important thing for the American government right now, why it's militarizing the streets, why it's because it's fearing rebellion on many issues, but primarily on Palestine. Up until now, there hasn't been any immigrant rights movements that carried arms and shot some American elite or security officers. But we had American citizens killing 2 Israeli workers at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. So we're getting very close to this possibility of civil war in the United States, with the main driver of it that the Western American elite are refusing to address is the issue of Palestine. The situation in the UK is not far off on this too, or Italy, or Spain, or France. So again, none of this militancy that is willing to risk life and liberty would have existed if it wasn't for October 7th.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Laith, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always. Please support Laith and what he's doing, and go to Free Palestine TV, and the website gonna be freepalestine.video, but they have they're on YouTube, on X, on Instagram. And thank you so much, and subscribe and like this video to reach more people. Thank you.
Thank
you so
you
much.
very much, Nima. Yes, just to remind everybody, we are demonetized on all platforms. So we depend 100% on the donations of our viewers. And yes, please go to freepalestine.video to subscribe and donate. And I hope everybody enjoys and learns from the content that we produce. Thank you very much, Nima, for having me.
Thank you, Laith. Bye-bye.